LP Steven Sykes of Enliven Global Media. And thank you for joining us on our YouTube channel. We appreciate everybody is participating, having fun, and so much more. As always, we always want to interview and have a good, honest, good discussion with wonderful people that's out there making a difference, trying to do positive things in the community, locally, beyond, and we never know wherever else. But we want to always highlight the positive and have good, honest, and real discussions. And today I'm honored and blessed and joined by a wonderful mentor, father, friend, and so much more, and businessman, Mr. Wonderful Coach Ellis. How are you doing today?
Mr. LP, I'm doing tabulous. How are you, my friend?
I am doing good and things. I'm just trying to have some fun and things, just to let you know, I appreciate that limo ride, sir. Thank you so much and things, having that good business meeting and things and so forth. So I thank you very kindly. One of the things I wanted to highlight and talk about is that, we've always had a lot of wonderful, powerful women on our shows, but we don't get very often good men and gentlemen that leads a good, positive leadership in let's share lessons and impart with us. So I thank you very much for joining us today. One of the things I wanted to highlight is that, oddly enough, there are people who still don't know who Coach Ellis is. So if you don't mind telling us, where are you from? Why did you get the name Coach Ellis and things like that?
All right, well, great. So I got the name Coach Ellis because I spent the last 20-something years coaching people in their life, typically with leadership development, faith development, and sometimes business development. So relationship development. And so what brought me to the forefront, I think, your attention is that several years ago, we actually hosted a local TV show called The RULZ, Relationships Universal Lessons, and where we had a chance to explain to people 12 universal lessons that single women should know about the men that they want to be in relationship with. And needless to say that we had a real good season in Hampton Roads, another good season up in Richmond, and people are clamoring about those rules and looking for more. So in the interim, we've developed rules for couples, rules for single men, and we're looking to develop even more in the rules franchise.
Amen. Now, why did you feel like you needed to come up with the rules of all things? Because everybody has their own desires, ideas, what they should follow. Why is yours so much more important?
Well, I would not say mine is more important. I think that mine is very relevant, and that if people take a good, honest, hard look, that the transparency in which we talk about these things is a change from a lot of the glamour and the glitz and the showmanship by relationships. Relationships are dirty, they're nasty, they're ugly, they're hurtful, but they're wonderful and they're life affirming at the same time. And you can't have one without the other. So when I was pastoring, I found out I was having the same relationship conversations with 60-year-old women as I was with my 16-year-old daughters. And I'm like, that didn't make any sense, which just told me that women, no matter at what age, they continue to fall for the same games that men play. And men, whether they try to or not, tend to play the same games. And what we found out is that men are easy. We do what we are rewarded for. So if bad behavior is rewarded, we will continue with bad behavior.
That's pretty deep, and those are some of the issues that we're dealing with today. We recently just had a conference. I had a conversation with a couple of people on Clubhouse, and we were talking about how we have discussions with people and how we start off with a certain tone. We're going to get that back, or not recognizing certain things, such as the lady going out and the gentleman forgot her birthday again for maybe the third or fourth time, but she continued to put up with that behavior and just instead of addressing it or moving on. Certain situations like that is always important to have discussions on how we can properly move on from, troubling situations always. What kind of when you, as you develop this through your pastoring and other life events, how would you say you got the training or the education or the skills to develop these rules?
Well, I am a certified transformational coach. So
Hmm.
I am a certified coach recognized by the National Coaching Federation. Um, and I guess what credentials me to actually come up with the rules is the anecdotal experience. And I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a psychologist. I am a theologue. I specialize in human beings and human behavior and human interaction, particularly with each other and with um, our eternal beings. The I think what got us started really was that once I started talking about this, and it really was by accident. I happened to be at lunch one day with my publicist, and my publicist was having a hard time, and she was unusually distracted. Going to find out that she just broke up with her boyfriend, for the last several years, um, and when she started explaining what the problem was, and she said, "I can't believe after all this time that X, Y, and Z happened." And I said something that really made her mad. In fact, she ended the meeting and walked out. I said that that's because for some reason you thought you were the star player, and he considered you his bench warmer, and now you're all broke up over something that he isn't even thinking about anymore.
Hmm.
Just say she got up and walked out. I won't say she flipped me off. I won't say that she ready to cuss me out, but I got the daggers. And 20 minutes later, she walked back in and said, "I had never considered it that way. So tell me more." And then this time, one of her friends had joined her, and we had a 2-hour conversation about the idea of how men and women interact. That wasn't even the topic of our conversation when I started off. That we were doing something else altogether. But at that juncture, she says, "Coach, this is what you need to do. You need to do this." And from that point forward, as we developed the 12, I think there are now 15.
Yeah.
Um, and we continue to add to the repertoire because I think we're continuing to find these universal principles. And these principles are not just good in interpersonal relationships. They're good for all relationships. Business relationships between parent and child, between employee and employers. The principles of the relationships are universal.
Amen. I'm going to, I'll be wrong if I leave it because I was going to go to something else, but then, since it was dangled out there and we're down there, we're in the middle of cupping season. It's still a little cold outside and things. So what's the difference between, for those who may not know, the difference between a star player, bench warmer, um, and somebody who's maybe, I forgot the term, but somebody who's trying to get on the team? But they're not even signed on a contract. But what's the difference between them?
All right. So to start this, we have to start with the idea that this game we play in relationships is
Mm-hmm.
rigged against women. It's rigged against women. It's all based upon the patriarchy, and so a bench warmer is simply one of many who are just happy to be on the team. A guy will, she is there strictly for his pleasure. I'm not saying this is a good thing. I am saying it's real. And unfortunately, many women don't think that they're bench warmers. They think that they're star players or skill players. Um, a skill player it's a give and take. It's an exchange. It's a mutual exchange that may or may not be intimate. Um, we all hear stories about, I got one to make me smarter, one to make me more religious, one to make me more, um, economical, conscious. There's an exchange, and I do for you, and you do for me, and we exchange things. And if we're intimate, that just happens to add bonus to my side, but it makes you play yourself. And then, of course, you have star player. It's all about her. She may not think she's star player quality, but for him, she is a star player. It's all about her. And what's critical in this is that, ladies, that whether you are a bench warmer, skill player, or star player has nothing to do with what you think about yourself. It's everything to do with how he treats you. And that's always a very difficult thing for people to admit or wrap their arms around.
How they treat you in terms of what we allowed for that, what they may have allowed that person to do.
So you can say that, and ultimately, yeah, people. I think it was Eleanor Roosevelt said that you can only I think you only get on a person's back when they've been down. So yeah, you can say that, but the truth be told is that we've been men. We know how to slow walk a young woman into a position they never thought they'd be in. Okay, and yeah, they may have allowed it, and it'll take them, to have a V8 moment 5 years from now. Say, oh man. And then when they go back and we do a forensic analysis of this relationship, they will see all the signs over the last several years. But while they're in the middle of it, they don't realize what's happening. And so it's easy for us to say what they allow, but in the middle of it, they're not allowing it. In the middle of it, they're experiencing it. It's only afterwards when we do the forensics that we say, yeah, this is what they allow.
Understood. I sent a message a couple of days ago, and I'm not sure if you got to it, but there's been a rise on this uptick on poly relationships, especially within the Black community and also some other Latin American communities. And there's tons of postings on social media. A lot of articles have been dedicated to it. And even there's a couple of TV shows, Sister Wives or whatever. I'm not a big agreement to it. I understand why some feel this way, and many give off all these different excuses as to it. But I was wondering if you've seen the rise of it in the last couple of years, and what is your take on it?
So on polygamy?
Well, yes, and then there's a lot of various channels, social media. I know there's always been in existence, excuse me, but now there's just been a big focus and big push on it now, more and more within our local communities. And I wanted to know, have you noticed this, and what is your thoughts towards it?
Yeah, so I would suggest that there's not a big push to it. Says that we become a more permissive society, so people are no longer hiding what they've always been doing. And so now with the advent and the spread of social media, just another conduit to express ourselves. This particular generation Z, Generation Y, these guys, these digital natives, they have, for the most part, generationally, they don't have any filters. And so what's coming forward, it's just a natural expression of the lack of filters in society. So there was a time where there are some things you would never mention in your parents' earsight. Some things you never want your parents to even know or hear. You can be married 35 years, you still don't want your parents knowing you're sleeping with your husband. It's just one of those things. But now, we're taking pregnancy photo shoots and we're having polyamorous conversations in the open space. And again, that just comes from the breakdown, in my opinion, of society, where we become much more permissive about what is acceptable, because individual rights have become more important than the aggregate cultural good.
Because I've seen it. You mentioned it be more permissive. It's not even within just in the younger generation. I'm seeing a lot of older people that's been in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and it's just like these excuses. And I think what they may feel supposedly from different cultures or African culture, or what the black man is supposed to be, all these different things. And it just seems extremely odd for me. And I understand it's a personal choice. I realize that. But it just seems that, as a society, it's, as you say, it may be more exposed to it. But I do feel that there's a level of uptake regarding it, because I think I don't think it's a good way to go. I think it's a path that's going to, additional path that we don't need to be involved in before we um, before things mess up, to be honest with you.
Yeah, so and I'm always careful to balance between individual rights and societal good.
Hmm.
And so I may not personally agree with polygamy and the expression of polygamy. It's a black man's right, or whatever those sites are saying. I do believe it is their right to say so.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, and what I often caution people is, if you don't like it, don't read it. And this is what's partially disturbing, is that people will get all up in arms about things they don't like, and yet they'll saturate themselves with it. Instead of simply, in the old days, if you didn't like what was on TV for your children, you didn't complain to the network, you turned the TV off. So I think that there's some responsibility on the individual to keep your own personal palate clean.
Correct. What they say, keep your what's the saying grandma says, your ear gate, your eye gate, your nose gate, mouth gate.
Yeah,
Those things,
keep your gates closed.
keep it closed. So those are very important. You mentioned, and we talk about this transformational, and there's different aspects for that for you. Um, and I know we talked about the relationship, but there are also aspects within your business that the transformational aspect works for you. Do you mind elaborating that a little bit?
So part of what transformational conversations does is not just relationship development; it's also um, faith development and leadership development.
Hmm.
So the we work hard on helping folks navigate their faith walks. Everyone's in a different space when it comes to how they're relating to the Almighty as they understand Him or her. Personally, I think the Almighty for me is a Him, but others have different positions. And the idea of helping people become closer with the eternal God as we understand God is a fascinating, and I think a very necessary work. There are people who will go to church and be in church all their lives and won't know anything more about God than the same 10 biblical stories they've heard their entire lives.
Very much so.
Folks will think that they have eternal salvation because they have a certain position in the church. I think that we really have to help people develop personal relationships that are transformational, to help us grow and change. And transformation is not just about change. You change something, you can unchange things. Transformation means that there is a synergy built that cannot be undone.
A level of development.
Well, I think transformation is a process. It's not a level, it's a process.
Right. Now, we are in a world where, and you mentioned leadership, we're in a world where there's a lot of change in terms of on the jobs and between the regular everyday employee. And there's a lack of leadership in the role. There's several directions in leadership, so please bear that I want to cover. So please bear with me. But one of them is leadership from a ownership standpoint, and also from a management standpoint of how we. And there's two sides to this: how we value our employees and how we rate our employees. I want to give an example. We already know about there's the big discomfort right now regarding the pay versus the level of work. But one story I want to introduce is there's the union workers that's been on strike, and Warren Buffett's the owner of the company, and he has executives handling it and things. And he's been on record about for a long time about paying people, about doing things in the right way, respecting employees, and what have you. But now this problem is laid before his own doorstep with his business. He's literally came out and said, if I quote correctly, "It's not my responsibility." Although people called out and said that you are the owner, and I think there's been some discussions between him and Bernie Sanders regarding this, but you are the owner. And he's like, it's not my responsibility. I don't want to do, I have nothing to do with it. Let them decide. Where does leadership come in this situation?
Well, a couple of things. So
You understand? You're familiar with the story.
yeah, and one of the things that you can take a position that Warren Buffett should solve it, or you take a position that Warren Buffett should coach his subordinate leaders on how to solve it. What Bernie Sanders is saying, hey, Warren Buffett, you jump in. Warren Buffett is saying, I pay people to do that. I hire people to do that. So I'm gonna let them do their job. This is not a lack of leadership. This is leadership. Letting your subordinate leaders lead. We may not like the outcomes. We may not like how long it's going to take. We may not like the negotiations. But I'm a firm believer that in executive leadership, that you cannot cut the knees out from your subordinate leaders and then expect to retain their loyalty and retain their their dedication to their jobs. I think that it's a misnomer to think that just because I'm the owner of the business, that I should solve all the problems. That's why I have a team.
Correct.
So this is not a lack of leadership. It's just that it's leadership that's allowing your subordinate leaders to do the work.
Correct. I wasn't referring to it as a lack of leadership. I'm just asking in terms of how does it affect, because a lot of people are not seeing it from that direction. Now, the concern is obviously the outcome is not turning out in favor of either side. And you mentioned, I'm going to let the people do the work. But then now, when does the owner cut in and say, okay, it's not getting handled by my team? Either they need some coaching or I may need to stick my toes in this situation. When do you make a decision in doing that? And I give an example of sometimes, now this may not be the most popular example analogy to some, but we look at the gentleman that owns the Washington football team or Jerry Jones and Cowboys, two very highly hands in the pot of what's going on with their teams. But they're also very known of not letting their executives do their jobs. I think maybe more recently they've been hands off of it a little bit, but in history, that's what they've been known for. Ted Turner.
But let's be clear. With Jerry Jones and Dan Snyder, the executives that they hire to do that are themselves. They own the executive spaces. So Jerry Jones is the president, chair of the board, and I forgot what else.
General manager.
I think so. So the decision making he makes. It's not that he's not letting the folks do the job. He's doing the job. Now, we can look at these high profile folks and make the assessment that they're not doing the right things. But the question is, what are the goals? Are the goals of an owner of a football team to make money? Are the goals to win championships? Are the goals to serve the people? Are the goals to enrich the city? I don't know any team that has a goal of anything other than folks don't buy professional teams for any other reason than to make money. So that's why you can have an all-star or you can have an all-pro running back one year and you cut him the very next year because it's all about money. So, I mean, I just want to be careful that we don't start castigating these leaders for not leading when they're doing exactly what they say that they're supposed to be doing.
Right. But going to the first part of that, when, as a leader, do you need to step in? What is a good time?
It depends on what your role is. So, I'm the president and CEO of Transformational Conversations. Let's just pretend that I had that this organization now is international. I got 1,000 executive coaches working for me, and there's a big hierarchical structure and about another 5,000 contractual coaches, right? So if I have a CEO and I have a chief financial officer and I have a chief coaching officer that handles the coaching, that's what they do. I deal with them. So my sphere is going to be small, 5 to 7 people. Then their sphere will be 5 to 7 people, and it'll have concentric circles all the way down through the organization. If you're not structured that way, what you end up having is someone thinking that Warren Buffett ought to know your name because you work for one of his thousands of companies. That's not even reasonable.
I expect the people down my executive line to have an understanding of who they are, where they are, and things. That's where I think about the show Undercover Boss.
Yep.
And
which is a brilliant show, by the way.
Right. Yeah, a good show. I felt that at times I felt that it did a disservice to the owner sometimes. For that's a very real reason. I'm not expecting the owner of this guy that had a chain of this whole factory that does the logistics. And he has all these different people places. He has 5 or 6 of them. And then they highlight I guess maybe the one employee or the one that has the best story or whatever. And then they give them a gift, a trip, a car, or buy their house for them, whatever the situation may be. But I felt like, to your point, where was the leadership in between here? He had and I don't remember the episode name, but he had a manager, he had a CEO, he had other executives, what have you, and all these different fault levels was going on. And then they were saying, I don't know my employees' names. You have like almost 1,000 people. There's no way he could do that. But for some reason now it gave this level of it made the general public who may not be familiar with the understanding of how business works, in their mind, the right that person should know what I'm doing. So like if I pay a bill to Verizon, the CEO of Verizon should know my name. No, it doesn't work that way.
No, it doesn't. But the other piece of that is that in the military, we have a thing that if it gets checked, it gets done. And what leaders have to understand, especially executive leaders, what makes them great executive leaders is knowing how to spot check their organization. Okay. So the thing I like about Undercover Boss, it does expose the boss for the boss's inability to hold a standard. And a lot of the episodes I watched, I'm saying, well, if this is happening here, what do you want to do about it? Now you see that. And in a couple of the episodes, the boss saw something and said, oh man, this is crazy. I've never seen this. And only to find out that the employees have been petitioning the boss for the last 2 years about this problem. That shows the boss's issue. So I'm good with the idea that leadership requires us to check. If it doesn't get checked, it doesn't get done. Because human beings default to the easy button. Okay? As men in particular, we take the path of least resistance. So a little bit of, a 2% variance here, followed by a 2% variance here, followed by a 2% variance here, followed by a 2% variance here, pretty soon gives you a great variance when you get to the end because you didn't deal with the 2% variance at the beginning.
Exactly. Bar rescue reminds me of another one similar to that as well. But you made a point of evaluating, which was led into my next question in that first phase of how do you evaluate your employees? And I asked that, and obviously I understand it depends per situation and what have you, but what are some good principles? And I asked that because many companies and individuals are not evaluating their employees very well. And now you're seeing problems. I see this in the education level, lead, police, various corporate jobs, what have you. It seems it's getting exposed. Let me rephrase that. It's been there. It's just now getting exposed more because you have the last year or so of all these people leaving jobs, and they're not leaving jobs necessarily just money is a component, but it's not that. But it's like what you said, a lot of lack of leadership, lack of care, what have you. There's some that no matter what you pay me, I would never go back to the job because of lack of protection and evaluation and things. So what are some good principles to allow people to evaluate their employees better?
All right. So first of all, everybody gets evaluated. Okay. That is the employee, the employer, the owners, the executives. Everybody gets evaluated. From the top down, the first thing we have to do about evaluating, we got to let people know what we expect. Usually that are position descriptions, job descriptions, contractual obligations, whatever our mode of describing what the expectations I have of you. That's the standard by which I measure you by. And if we build this evaluation tool correctly, it's almost like building SMART goals. And then I can evaluate how you've done in achieving this goal. And I think that it's important that folks know what the standard is. So if I'm going to hire Mr. LP, I'll say, here's your job description. Do you agree to this? If you agree to this, that's what I'm measuring you by. So when I evaluate you and you say, well, I didn't do that, blah, 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 I didn't think it was important. Say, wrong answer. This is what you agreed to. Okay. And so I evaluate you based upon what you agreed to do when you took the job. There's also a process called a 360-degree evaluation. And this is particularly important for folks in leadership, that not only are you evaluated by folks that you report to, you're evaluated by your peers and your subordinates. And I think your subordinates' evaluation of you is of critical importance.
And this is not going off the rails here, but I want to say that where I had a very early understanding of all of this and things, two sides of this. I saw the production many, many years ago from the Phil Donahue show. And he was in Philadelphia.
You're dating yourself, man.
Yeah, I know. But him and Sal, and then years ago, later on in the 80s, Sally Jesse Raphael, I got to see behind the scenes about how things were running to the show. And it left a big importance of me in terms of like how things have, and I blame my grandmother because I said this is where the show producing side comes in, that, how things had to be done. And that day they happened to be doing some type of, she called, it was a review at the time, it was a call. And it was all of these different things. And some of the people with the lighting and whatever, the sound people, he got rid of them at the end of the review. And he was going over, this is what we need, this is what's going on, and things like that. And I was just like, wow. And I remember, and it's funny, I remember, at the end of the show, you see the TR World, the logo that pops up at the end. And I was like, the executives were there because they had the shirt with the logo. And I was like, oh, that's the logo at the end of the show. The things that I remember. And it was just like, this is what goes on and about how we review. And that type of process was there. The other thing I learned it from is, and this is really may sound sad, but I realized I look at Transformers and G.I. Joe. I remember the cartoons. One of the things about how when you say, the expectations of leadership, I realized like a good half of the writers for a lot of those shows, and especially I guess the glory years of the 80s, a lot of them wrote a lot of employee and business manuals as well. And I found out. And does how the structures, especially in G.I. Joe, granted you had all these characters, but there was each one of them had certain levels of leadership. And if you ever got the characters and they had read the background of it at the level of what each one was expectation. And I remember how Duke, for example, the level, or him and General Hawk later on, how the expectations he set for each one of them, and when they didn't have it, he got into them. And I'll just remember, either Shipwreck or I think Duke's brother doing a G.I. Joe movie. I know this may sound crazy, but if you look at it from on this level for a different lens, you see the level of leadership and expectations and how you had to go about change accordingly for that. And I thought that, and that now I'm a kid and I'm looking at it that way. I know this sounds strange, but when I felt that helped set the process of what your expectations are going into adulthood. And I think that was always apparent. It just depends on the type of lens that you're looking.
Yeah, so I think what you'll find is that there are a lot of good leadership lessons that can be learned by multiple TV shows or for instance, that in officer candidate school in the Army, one of our leadership lesson every day when we get time to talk about leadership lessons, we watch Star Trek, and we were to mine out the leadership lessons from James Tiberius Kirk. I think what we found out is there are all kinds of leadership lessons if you know where to look and how to mine them out. It's not just Star Trek and G.I. Joe. It's from Cosby Show, A Different World, and Maude, All in the Family. You can find leadership lessons in all of these spaces if you know where to look, which goes back to the idea that if you truly want to understand leadership, you must be a student of human beings. Leadership really is nothing more than moving people onto their eternal agendas. That's all it is. And it's not what people don't seem to understand about true leadership. It's not about me getting you to do anything. Leadership is about me helping to move you onto the agenda for your life. And it happens to support my business, then that's great. Because if your values and your goals don't coincide with my company's goals, then the best thing I can do for you is help you find a space with a business that matches your personal goals.
Fair enough. That is fair enough. For those who I may have missed it before, what part of the world did you grow up from, and where are you from?
I'm a military brat.
Okay.
So I was born in Anchorage. I spent time in New Mexico, Philippines, Alabama, Turkey, Germany, Alabama again. So I'm a military brat.
And with that type of background, obviously that gives a variety of perspectives. As you grew into adulthood, or let me backtrack, what was one of the biggest perspectives that you were able to see that made a big influence on your life, say in your middle school and high school years?
So really it was between my last year in high school and my first year of college. And that was my personal understanding of who I was as a man of color. That perspective I did not have in high school. If you could think about Carlton from the Fresh Prince, that was me coming out of high school.
Okay.
The HBCU experience totally transformed my life. And I went from being Carlton to being the militant. The guy that just saw Roots for the first time want to kill everything that's white. And then the leveling off again, and evening out, that the Army brought me full circle back around. So for me, the lessons of who I was from an ethnocentric position was the thing that changed. That I think is the biggest change in my life happened during my college years.
What would you say right now, with our young men are being, or actually everybody's being called to task in today's world? But right now, one of the things I am struggling to encourage, I would say not myself encourage, but one of the things that we are having a struggle with in our community is we talk about offline, we talk about foundations a lot from a man's perspective and also from a woman's perspective. What are some of the foundations that are missing within in our structure? And I will narrow it down in terms of people of color. And if we want to go further, we could say within the Black community. And we could even go further in terms of different parts of the world. But what are some of the things that we are missing foundational wise that we need to improve on so we can move forward in terms of our development and our legacies?
So again, I would not use the language improve upon. I would use the language become more aware of. And for me, who we are as African Americans on the world stage is one thing that I do not believe that many spend any time thinking about. We are a people who has survived, 400 years of degradation, the dismantling of our families, our religion, our, all of our social structures, the ripping away of our names, the separating of families. And yet, after all that we have come through and continue to come through, as kind of examples of what persistence looks like. At the core of many of our social ills is the individual accountability for ourselves and our neighbors. So I have a responsibility for everything that I do. I have a responsibility for how that impacts my neighbor. I have a responsibility to my neighbor to do no harm. And I think we miss that. And we are quick to say, woe is me, I've got this problem and from slavery, this is why it happened. And those are true statements. Dismantling of the Black family is a historical, significant, emotional event. It is. But at some juncture, to use a phrase of a good friend of mine, Raw Silk, at some time we become co-conspirators in the crime we say was committed against us. Mm-hmm. So at what juncture do we say, all right, yeah, my feelings are hurt, or I've gotten a raw deal. Okay, it is what it is. Move on. Now, how do I step up and change my fortune?
Exactly, because we have I see families. I'll use this young lady. We've had a conversation, and she's welcomed the example. She's a lady that single mother. One kid's older and grown, another one just turning 18. Working through challenges where the remaining family members have not been supportive as much. Kid may have done some things wrong. but at the end of the day, it's still a 17, 18-year-old child. And you as an adult have to understand you can't expect the same mindset or level of maturity on an 18 versus a 30-year-old. And you can't, at the end of the day, you have a responsibility to protect that child. Now, yes, child may have done some things, but you have to look at it from this perspective of, okay, this has happened and it's happened several times, and we're trying to work through it. But it would be better, instead of beating each other up while the child's going through this, let's come together as a unit and not argue and see what we can do and work together.
And that generally works, but people have to be willing. And what I find is that in human interaction, people are always willing to default to what's wrong. They're always willing to default to the obvious place of pain. And in my coaching, especially when I do family coaching, one of the examples I give is that we have to find reasons to celebrate.
Mm-hmm.
So, a child comes home with 5 F's and a D on a report card. I don't know about you, Mr. LP. I am losing my mind. Okay?
But you know what? I would tell you let me tell you where I've advanced in my years. I should say, things I'm catching up to you. I'm going to look at it as, where was the effort? My child attended school every day. Probably could tell you more about the class and everything going on than the person that did make the A, and what's doing on, and what could we do. And I'll celebrate that you made that effort in things and what we could proceed. And
but doesn't that get us to this place where everybody gets a trophy for participating?
It could be, but that's not where I'm. I would not let it go at that. I would say, okay, you're there, because I see many say, well, they're there and what have you. I'm not going to settle at that. See, I feel that I am not the participation trophy person. I think that's one of the worst things we did in society. I am that person that says, okay, I recognize it, but I've learned that even in my own life, you have to learn to celebrate your wins and things like that, and recognize it, and then that where was the level of growth. Now, what are you going to do about it to do better? Because there's never going to be a level of perfection, but there's always a level of cognizant, willful action that you're going to do to help better your life. So that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So let me finish with this anecdote. I think this is what we're getting to. So, 5 F's and a D. I as a father, I would be losing my mind.
Yeah.
Okay. However, what I discovered is that if I were to go and to celebrate the 1D, right, that in many cases has the effect that we desire. So the next time around, because we celebrated the D, there's going to be more effort to make more D's and make that D a C.
Okay.
Then we begin to celebrate that.
So are we celebrating the progression?
We're finding reasons to celebrate.
Okay.
So because it's easy to point out you failed 5 classes. Well, no duh, Sherlock. Right? And with a child, they know they failed. Everyone is reminding them they failed. So nobody's helping them figure out that there's hope. Again, not participation trophies, but we are celebrating the little light, this little spark, hoping to ignite that spark into a roaring flame of dedication and of hard work. And what I found is that works with kids, that works with coworkers, that works with church people, that works with your friends. That works. You find a reason to celebrate. We live in a society that we've lost the ability to celebrate in spite of. We look for the wins when we're supposed to win. Right?
Right. But I guess it's just for me, I would feel more of an indictment as me as a father. What the heck did I do to not stay on top of my child and know what's going on to go get that FND? Like what predicated that? And I take we've got to. There was always this cartoon of like parents in the 70s versus parents today, and the kid acted bad. What the teacher said was law, and you don't mess with the teacher, the pastor, and the local neighbor in the local corner store. What they said, and it's all what your kid did was law. Now it's like, what did you say to the child? And things. And don't get me wrong, there's no perfect scenario on each one all the time, but where's the level of it can't be affable and just be like whatever. It has to be a level of maturity and growth, and have a sit down with yourself and say, what am I doing wrong and things. I'm sorry.
So in the scenario that I just presented about 5 F's and D, that's a failure on multiple spaces. Okay, it is a parental challenge. It is a teacher's challenge. It is a student's challenge. And I think that we had the conversation about student effort with the student. We had the conversation with the teacher, the teachers, about parental engagement. If I am an engaged parent, then how come why am I finding this out now? If I'm not an engaged parent, in a lot of cases, the parents are not engaged, then you look at in the holistic approach in this 3-legged stool, which leg is shorter than the others, and you figure out how to rebalance the stool, because a child or a coworker or whatever the scenario involves, there are always multiple people. There's always the person, the supervisor, or the person responsible that they're responsible to, and the people who are responsible to that person.
So that's where the community is that where we say it takes a village, it takes a community to fix that stool so it's all growing? Because and I'm speaking, I agree with you, but I'm speaking about the excuses, well, I shouldn't say, the concerns that the single mother that's working 2 jobs, or the fathers that's involved, and I'm working 2 jobs. I'm only here from like 10 o'clock to 5 in the morning. I'm back out again. I don't know what's going on. This is where the ownership of the grandma, the aunties, the cousins, the neighbors, everybody else figure out where are you coming.
No. So, all right. And this is going to be unpopular, but I believe this to be true. Parents are responsible for their children.
Correct.
Period. Okay. So if you're a single mom, okay, you're not a single mom. You're a mom who happens to be single, because you did not create this child on your own.
Okay.
There is a father somewhere. Now, if the guy's unavailable because he's incarcerated, whatever, I got it. But many times what happens is that because we break up, because we moved on with our lives, somehow we're disengaged from parenting together. And in a lot of cases, what we find is that when I do relational coaching, we're helping people understand that regardless of whether you and your ex can get along, you co-parent.
Exactly.
And the child deserves 2 decisively engaged parents. And so, the village and all that, that's great. That briefs well, and there's some truth in it. But the village motif is in support of the family. not a substitute for the family.
Oh, agree. It can't be the not to minimize anybody, but it's a tool.
It is a tool.
It's a tool, and where you have to. I've always used the purse thing. You got the purse, you got the book bag, the purse, the clutch, and and the little pocket change thing. There's
I have
different
no idea
levels.
what you're talking about, but okay.
There's different levels of what you're carrying. Okay, yeah, the women, you got the big shoulder bag. Inside that, you got the big purse. Inside that, you got the clutch.
I don't deal with purses, so I got it. Okay. The big thing here,
Fair.
right, is that and this is part of one of the things that I'm uncomfortable is that single mom, if you're working 2 jobs and you only got 6 hours off in between your jobs, right? Well, some of that has to be for your child.
Mm-hmm.
Has to be. The child did not ask you to work 2 jobs, right? And I don't know any child who will ever say that I wish I had more stuff over I wish I had more time. And we're busy, we say we're working hard, 2 jobs, but yeah, we'll have $100 hairdos and $100 nails and stuff, and $500 cell phones, and
You pay for what you, yeah.
And I know a lot of single mom people that say I don't get it. I don't get it, because if you truly were putting your child first, then you would sacrifice something. And to say that I'm sacrificing having to work 2 jobs, no, that's your responsibility. That's not a sacrifice. Sacrifice is what you are willing to go without, so your child would have. Right now, what you're doing, you're going without time with your child, so your child have what? No time with you? I don't get that part. So I am, I have several clients who are single moms. They're mad at me all the time because I'm saying, don't I deserve to have a life? No, you forfeited that when you had your child. As parents, we have our lives, but until our child is out, a lot of what we do is centered around that child.
I've always had the belief, and I think we talked about this before, that you still have to take care of yourself, because if you don't it's that light thing on an airplane where they tell you put your mask on before anybody else, and it sounds harsh.
Yep.
But you got to take care of yourself so you could be that good parent.
Well, self-care is self-care is a life multiplier. It is, right? But there's difference between self-care and selfish care. Okay, if you really want to talk self-care, what it probably means is that you're taking care of your spiritual growth, you're taking care of your physical health, taking care of your psychological health, right? That's self-care.
Mm-hmm.
Doing your nails is not self-care.
Okay.
Getting your hair done is not self-care.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The vanity spaces we are in, that we began to bastardize the idea of self-care by putting in those things which make us feel good, as opposed to making us better.
Gotcha. All right. Before we exit out this, I'm going to give you several words, and I want to get your initial thoughts of each word. Okay. Vacation.
Absolutely.
Okay. Self-care was one of them.
A must.
Family.
Essential.
Cartoons.
Yeah. Unnecessary.
Library.
Incredibly important.
Voting.
Essential and life-giving.
Africa.
Continent of vast resources.
Antarctica.
Too cold, too cold, too cold.
Clouds.
Heavens.
Music.
Soothing.
Favorite musician.
Will Downing.
Favorite book.
Why We Can't Wait.
What's your well, this was a question, but what was your definition of education?
So there's a quote that I use at the bottom of my email. It says, when the experience exceeds your expectation, education occurs. So,
okay. A to-do task list.
A waste.
Contests.
Conflict.
Okay. Sports.
Cowboys.
Gotcha. Okay. Last two. Generation.
Legacy.
Wealth.
Generational.
Okay. For those who hear this and they want to move forward and get, let's say, contacting you, have questions, leadership, faith, education, leadership, faith, relationship development, may have some questions on education or what have you. How can people get in contact with you, sir?
Well, the easiest way is hit me on email at coach@elliscrum.net. That's the best way. You also find me on Facebook under Coach Ellis Crum, and I'm responsive to inquiries.
Okay, no problem. And I thank you very much, sir. And what is a tap for 2022 for you this year?
Well, 2022, the hope and the prayer is that by the summer, the book will actually be out on the rules. So we've been delaying for now 5 or 6 years, but I got a ghostwriter, and we're going to be moving forward getting the book out.
All right. Thank you so very much. We look forward to that book. I want my exclusive copy signed. All right. I appreciate it for sending out in the mail when it comes in. And I thank you very kindly for your time, sir. I appreciate it so very much.
Great. Thank you so much for having me, Mr. LP.
No problem.
Have a great new year.
Thank you. Thank you. And everybody, thank you so very much for joining us. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to email us at enliven, ENLIVENGM@gmail.com, where you can find us on YouTube. We also have a Patreon page and so many more other things out there. I just appreciate you can take the time out to look. Post your comments and messages below, and we'd love to definitely answer them. And we have some more things and sponsors coming after this. So thank you again, and may you have a great and blessed day. Bye-bye.